federal government talks about increasing skilled migrant numbers in Australia, unions are demanding a trade-off scheme. The Australian Workers Union is calling for compulsory training of Australians. So for every visa given, a local is trained in that role. Immigration specialist Melanie McFarlane is our guest this hour. Melanie, welcome. Our migration cap sits at 160,000, but it could be raised to 180 or even 200,000. How much of a change will that make to the skills crisis?
To be honest, Monica, it's a long-term solution because it takes time to get these migrants in the first place. They need to have their skills assessed, they need to be recognised as qualified in their area, and all of these types of things can take between 6 to 9 months. Then the states need to recognise their skills, and then they actually need to come into the country and get a job. So that's very much a long-term solution. And the short-term solution would be for them for the government to prioritise the students, international students and working holidaymakers who can actually come into the country, and thanks to a temporary relaxation of work rights for student visas, they can work full-time. So this would be the more short-term solution, and raising the number of permanent visas is not actually an immediate solution to our labour crisis.
What is the backlog like getting these visas approved at the moment?
Well, you can see a turtle behind me on the wall. It's really like that. We're seeing visas come through very slowly. 6 months, for example, for a temporary worker who needs to come here urgently to work in the mines, for example, or elsewhere. 2 to 3 months or longer for student visas, where they're supposed to take 4 to 6 weeks. And permanent visas, as I mentioned, could take 9 months, even up to 1 year. So it's a long time, and that's really where the priority needs to be, to bring all of these workers in much more quickly.
Melanie, what is your take then on the union's call for businesses to train an Australian for every skilled migrant that they employ?
Well, of course, they're doing their job. And the reality is that's great. Yes, of course, we need more apprentices and we need more training for Australians. But the reality is when you sponsor a worker actually through a company, you pay a very large amount, up to $7,000 or $8,000 sometimes, to a training contribution fund, which actually does then go to apprenticeships for Australians. So that is actually already happening, and it's based in immigration law. And so the short-term solution should be to bring people on temporary visas initially to help to fill this skill shortage. And yes, of course, in the background, in the long term, absolutely upskill and train Australians.
Some viewers' comments on this, Melanie. Heather Rao says, don't let the skilled migrants in. They'll go on an ABN and not pay their taxes, then leave. Educate and train people here.
Obviously, of course, these are points that are going to be made, but the reality is back between December 2019 and December 2021, 416,000 skilled migrants left the country, and there's 500,000 job vacancies at the moment. Migrants actually help the economy. They bring in their skill sets and their creativity, and they create jobs. They are vital for Australia right now.
Lakeisha Louise writes, having our qualifications recognised from overseas would be a good start. I know some are, but not all. Even though the training qualifications is for the exact same job role, I haven't been able to get back into childcare since getting my permanent residency, as my certificate is not recognised here in WA.
Yes, I mean, these are very good points. The skills assessing process takes far too long, and there's certain qualifications, I mean, in the health sector, for example, like doctors and nurses, that just takes such a long time, and that really needs to be improved. Absolutely, recognition of qualifications just needs to be a much more expedient process, and that would make a huge difference also, especially if the numbers are being raised for those permanent migrants to come into the country. Well, let's get that process done faster.
Jai McGee says, here's an idea. How about training young Australians? Give them the opportunity, more traineeships and apprenticeships.
Absolutely. And, the thing is, as I mentioned, that with employer sponsorship, every employer, it's like a sponsorship tax. Every employer has to pay a certain amount into this training contribution fund. So it really does pay for Australians to be upskilled. And so that really, I think, is is a great solution in itself.
And Liam Hunt writes, definitely give Australians the opportunity to upskill free or subsidised. Upskilling your own citizens is essential to securing the local economy.
Absolutely agree. But the reality is we have a labour crisis right now, 500,000 vacant jobs, and we don't have enough people in Australia to fill it. A working population of 12 million here in Australia, an ageing population, that there have always been these issues. I believe that there always will be. So of course, use money from migrants to train and upskill Australians, but be realistic and know that migrants also bring in and create jobs too.
Immigration specialist Melanie McFarlane, thank you for being our guest this hour.
Thank you, Monica.